The sun rose over the hills, painting the moss-covered ranch in warm gold. Luke stood on the porch, looking over the land he had worked so tirelessly to restore. The barn roof was sturdy, the fences strong and straight, and the orchard alive with new growth. The pastures, once tangled with weeds and wild vines, now held fresh grass, ready for the cattle he planned to raise. The creek sparkled as it wound through the property, and the hidden spring he had discovered months before flowed steadily, promising life to every corner of the ranch. Luke smiled, feeling a sense of pride unlike anything he had ever known. The journey had been long and challenging, but the ranch had finally begun to reflect his care, patience, and hard work. Each part of the land, from the moss-covered fences to the orchard and barn, told the story of transformation, and Luke felt a deep satisfaction in knowing he had accomplished something truly remarkable. The town had noticed the changes as well. Word spread quickly that the moss-covered ranch, once laughed at and dismissed, had been restored to a place of beauty and productivity. People began visiting, curious to see the transformation for themselves. Some came to seek advice on farming and ranching, others to admire the lush fields and the restored barn. Luke welcomed them all, sharing what he had learned and encouraging them to see value in what others had overlooked. One afternoon, Tom, the rancher who had once laughed at him, rode over on horseback. He stopped at the gate, watching quietly as Luke moved through the fields, checking on the growth of the newly planted crops. Luke looked up and waved. "Luke?" Tom said, a small smile forming on his face. "I have to admit, I underestimated you. This ranch, it's amazing." Luke wiped his hands on his shirt and smiled warmly. "Thanks, Tom. It took a lot of work, but it was worth it. This land had potential. I just had to see it." Tom nodded, looking around at the pasture, barn, and orchard. "You've done something incredible here. I think everyone in town could learn from your dedication." Luke felt a quiet pride. The ranch was no longer just a place. It had become a symbol of perseverance, patience, and vision. He had proven that hard work and belief in oneself could transform even the most forgotten and moss-covered place into something extraordinary. As the weeks passed, Luke continued his work. He planted more crops, repaired every fence on the property, and tended to the orchard. The barn, fully restored, became a center of activity, housing cattle, tools, and supplies. Luke's careful management of the creek and spring ensured that water was plentiful, and the land flourished under his care. Children from town began visiting the ranch, fascinated by the transformation. They ran through the fields, explored the orchard, and watched Luke at work. He taught them about planting, caring for animals, and respecting the land. The ranch became a place of learning and inspiration, showing that even the most neglected places could thrive with effort and dedication. One morning, Luke discovered a new surprise. While inspecting the creek, he noticed that the water had carved a small channel through the rocks, creating a tiny pool. The pool reflected the sunlight, sparkling like a gem. Luke realized that the creek's natural flow could be used to irrigate the fields more efficiently. With a few simple adjustments, he created channels that allowed water to reach every part of the pasture. The land responded quickly, and within days the grass grew taller and greener than ever before. The townsfolk, who had once laughed at him, began to see the ranch as a place of value. They marveled at Luke's transformation of the land and recognized the effort, skill, and patience it had taken to achieve such results. Many asked Luke for guidance on their own properties, and he happily shared his knowledge, eager to help others see the hidden potential in the land around them. Luke's story began to spread beyond the town. People from neighboring areas came to visit, curious to witness the moss-covered ranch that had been transformed into a thriving and beautiful property. They admired the barn, the orchard, and the lush pastures, and they learned from Luke's example that hard work, vision, and care could turn any place into something remarkable. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Luke sat on the porch with a journal in his hand. He wrote about the journey he had taken, from the day he had inherited the moss-covered ranch to the present moment. He recorded every challenge, every discovery, and every success. The journal became a chronicle of perseverance and hope, a testament to what one person could achieve with dedication and belief. Luke looked out over the fields, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The ranch was no longer a place of laughter and doubt. It had become a home, a sanctuary, and a symbol of possibility. The moss-covered land, once mocked and forgotten, had been transformed into something alive, productive, and inspiring. That night, Luke stood under the stars, listening to the gentle sounds of the ranch. The creek bubbled softly, the trees swayed in the breeze, and the distant hoot of an owl echoed across the fields. He felt a connection to the land that went beyond ownership. It was as if the ranch had become a part of him, and he a part of it. He thought about the people who had doubted him, the laughter he had faced, and the challenges he had overcome. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered was what he had built, a place of life, beauty, and value. Luke realized that true success was not measured by wealth or approval, but by the care, effort, and love one puts into something. Over the following months, Luke's ranch continued to thrive. Crops flourished, animals multiplied, and the orchard produced fruit unlike anything the town had seen before. Luke worked tirelessly, but he found joy in every task. The ranch had become a living testament to the power of determination and vision. Visitors continued to come, inspired by Luke's story and the transformation of the moss-covered ranch. Children learned about the land, farmers learned new techniques, and everyone who came left with a renewed sense of hope. Luke welcomed all, teaching them that with patience, care, and effort, even the most forgotten places could be brought back to life. One day, a reporter from a nearby city visited the ranch. He marveled at the transformation and interviewed Luke about his journey. Luke spoke humbly, explaining that it had not been easy, but that the ranch had rewarded him for his care and persistence. The story of the moss-covered ranch, once mocked and dismissed, quickly spread far and wide, inspiring countless others to see value in places and opportunities others overlooked. As the years passed, Luke's ranch became more than just a property. It was a legacy, a place where hard work, patience, and vision had created something extraordinary. Families visited, farmers learned, and the town grew proud of the young cowboy who had turned laughter into admiration. Luke often stood on the hill overlooking the ranch, thinking about the journey he had taken. He remembered the day he received the letter, the first steps onto the moss-covered land, and the long hours of work that had followed. He smiled, knowing that every challenge had been worth it. The ranch was alive, productive, and beautiful, and it had become a place of inspiration for everyone who saw it. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant colors across the valley, Luke reflected on the lesson he had learned. The moss-covered ranch had taught him that value is often hidden, that patience and care can reveal treasures unseen, and that perseverance can transform even the most neglected places into something extraordinary. The ranch, once mocked and laughed at, was now a symbol of hope, hard work, and vision. Luke knew that the true value of the land was not in money or approval, but in the effort, love, and dedication he had poured into it. It was a legacy that would last for generations, inspiring others to see potential where others saw only neglect. As night fell, Luke sat on the porch, listening to the gentle sounds of his thriving ranch. The wind whispered through the trees, the creek sparkled in the moonlight, and the barn stood proudly, a testament to his efforts. He felt a quiet happiness, knowing that he had taken a moss-covered, forgotten ranch and turned it into a place of life, beauty, and inspiration. Luke smiled, understanding that this ranch was more than land. It was a dream realized, a journey completed, and a story that would be told for years to come. The moss-covered ranch, once dismissed and laughed at, had become a shining example of what one person can achieve with patience, care, and unwavering determination. And in that moment, Luke knew that the true treasure of the ranch was not in its soil, water, or gold, but in the journey itself, the journey of turning the impossible into reality. The morning sun painted the moss-covered ranch in soft gold as Luke stepped outside. The air was fresh, carrying the scents of wet earth, wildflowers, and the creek that gurgled nearby. After days of hard work, the ranch was slowly starting to show the results of Luke's effort. The barn roof was partially repaired, the fences were straightening under his careful hands, and some areas of the orchard had already been cleared of tangled vines. Luke had a plan for the day. He wanted to start planting more of the seeds he had found in the hidden cellar, especially the ones his great-uncle had noted as rare and valuable. These seeds could produce crops unlike any in the region, and Luke hoped they would not only help the ranch, but also show others that the land had untapped potential. As he worked in the fields, Luke noticed the sunlight glinting on the creek and a smile spread across his face. The natural spring he had discovered days before would make irrigation easy, and soon the pastures would be lush and green. He dug small furrows and carefully planted each seed, covering them with rich soil and patting it gently. Each seed represented hope, a small step toward turning the moss-covered ranch into something extraordinary. By late morning, the town had begun to stir with curiosity. Word had spread that Luke was working tirelessly on the ranch, and some neighbors decided to ride over to see for themselves. At first, they hesitated at the gate, unsure whether to approach. Tom, the rancher who had laughed at Luke, was among them. He leaned on his fence, watching quietly, arms crossed. Luke noticed him but did not stop working. He knew that attention from the townsfolk could be distracting, but he also understood that today might be a turning point. Slowly, the people began to approach, intrigued by the changes they were seeing. The cleared areas, the repaired fences, and the early growth of new grass caught their eyes. "Luke," Tom called out finally. "I have to admit, it looks better than I thought." Luke wiped the sweat from his brow and smiled. "Thanks. There's still a lot to do, but it's coming together." Other neighbors murmured in agreement. Some of them had laughed at him before, but now they were beginning to see the ranch through Luke's eyes. A land full of potential, waiting for care and attention. Encouraged by their interest, Luke decided to give them a small tour. He led them to the barn, showing the repairs he had made. He pointed out the orchard where he had cleared vines and pruned the trees. Finally, he led them to the creek and the hidden spring behind the waterfall, explaining how it could provide water for crops and animals. The townsfolk were amazed. They had assumed the ranch was worthless, but Luke's hard work was proving them wrong. Some of them asked questions about his methods, and Luke patiently explained everything, from planting techniques to fence repair. He did not brag or boast. He simply shared what he had learned and what he had discovered. By midday, Luke returned to his own work, energized by the interest and respect he was beginning to earn. He repaired more fences, cleared additional brush, and tended to the seeds he had planted earlier. Each task was physically demanding, but he felt stronger and more alive than he had in years. The ranch was no longer just a challenge. It was becoming a purpose, a project that gave him pride and joy. As afternoon approached, Luke decided to tackle another section of the barn that had been particularly damaged by years of neglect. He replaced broken boards and reinforced the structure with nails and timber he had found in the hidden cellar. The barn slowly regained its strength and form, and by the time the sun reached its peak, Luke could step back and admire his work. The building looked sturdier, almost as if it had been rebuilt overnight by magic. Late in the afternoon, a young couple from town rode over on horseback. They had heard about Luke's discoveries and wanted to see the ranch for themselves. Luke welcomed them warmly and led them on a tour, showing the barn, the orchard, and the fields he had cleared. "This place is incredible," the woman said, eyes wide. "I never imagined it could look like this." Luke smiled, brushing sweat from his forehead. "It just needed a little care and patience. There's still a long way to go, but it's getting there." The couple nodded in admiration. Luke realized that the ranch was beginning to inspire people, just as it had inspired him. His hard work was no longer just about proving the townsfolk wrong. It was about creating something meaningful and beautiful. As the sun began to set, Luke climbed a small hill overlooking the property. The barn, fences, and orchard glowed in the warm light. The creek reflected the colors of the sky, and the trees swayed gently in the evening breeze. Luke felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The ranch, once mocked and forgotten, was starting to transform before his eyes. That evening, Luke returned to the house and prepared a simple dinner. As he ate, he thought about the discoveries he had made in the hidden cellar, the seeds he had planted, and the repairs he had completed. Each small success added to the sense of progress and hope. He realized that the moss-covered ranch was not just land. It was a living, breathing project that rewarded care, patience, and hard work. Before going to bed, Luke stepped outside and looked at the stars. The night was calm and quiet, filled only with the sounds of the creek, the rustling trees, and the distant calls of owls. He felt connected to the land in a way he had never felt before. It was as if the ranch itself was acknowledging his efforts, responding to his care with quiet beauty and promise. Luke opened his journal and wrote, "Today, the town began to see the ranch as I see it. The barn is stronger, the orchard is alive, and the fields show promise. This land has more value than anyone imagined." I will continue to work, and one day it will shine. He paused for a moment, thinking about the future. He imagined the barn fully restored, the orchard filled with fruit, and the pastures lush and green. He pictured families visiting the ranch, children playing near the creek, and animals thriving under his care. The moss-covered ranch was becoming a place of life and inspiration. Luke went to bed that night feeling more confident than ever. He knew that challenges would continue, but he also knew that he was capable of meeting them. The ranch had hidden treasures, fertile soil, and abundant water, but it also had something more: the opportunity for someone willing to see its potential and work tirelessly to bring it to life. As he drifted off to sleep, Luke felt a quiet pride. The townsfolk who had laughed at him could not see the hidden possibilities of the ranch, but that did not matter. Luke had discovered the true value of the land, and he was determined to unlock every secret it held. Tomorrow, he thought, would bring new challenges and new discoveries. The moss-covered ranch, once mocked and forgotten, was alive with potential. Luke knew that with patience, care, and hard work, it would become a symbol of perseverance, determination, and hope. And in his heart, he smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of the ranch's true transformation. The morning sun crept over the hills, casting a golden glow across the moss-covered ranch. Luke woke early, stretching as he listened to the familiar sounds of the creek and the distant call of a hawk circling above. The previous days had been exhausting, but the work had given him a new energy, a sense of purpose he had never felt before. Today, he decided, he would explore the area near the moss-covered stone he had uncovered the day before. Something about it felt important, as if it was a key to the ranch's hidden secrets. After a simple breakfast of bread and fresh milk from the neighbor's farm, Luke saddled his horse, tying his tools to the saddle. He rode to the area where he had found the stone, and with gloves on, he began digging carefully around it. The earth was damp, but the soil was rich and soft, easy to work with. Within an hour, he uncovered the full outline of a small stone cellar, hidden for decades beneath moss and roots. Luke's heart raced. He cleared the remaining dirt and carefully lifted the heavy wooden lid. Inside, the cellar was cool and dark, filled with boxes and old crates. Dust floated in the air as he peered inside, his curiosity growing. He grabbed a lantern from his saddlebag and stepped down carefully, the wooden ladder creaking under his weight. The first crate he opened contained old farming tools, plows, hammers, and knives that, with some cleaning, would be very useful. Luke smiled, thinking about how many times he had wished for better equipment. The second crate held jars of seeds, some of which were rare and valuable. These seeds had the potential to grow crops that could flourish even in challenging conditions. Then, Luke's hand touched something unusual, a small, leather-bound box tucked in the corner. He opened it slowly, revealing papers, letters, and a few gold coins. The letters were written by his great-uncle, describing the ranch in detail and the careful planning he had done over the years. Luke read eagerly, learning that his great-uncle had anticipated that the property would one day be inherited by someone who could see its true value. One letter caught Luke's attention. It read, "This land may appear forgotten, but it holds treasures not just in soil or water, but in the care and patience of those who work it. Trust in yourself and you will uncover what others cannot see." Luke felt a shiver of excitement. The gold coins were a surprise, but more importantly, the letter reinforced his belief that he was on the right path. This ranch, once laughed at by the townsfolk, was slowly revealing its hidden treasures. After organizing the crates, Luke climbed out of the cellar and wiped his hands. He looked around the property, noticing the subtle details he had not seen before. The creek that ran along the edge of the property was wider than he had first thought, with a small waterfall hidden behind a thicket of trees. The pasture was uneven but fertile, perfect for planting new grass for cattle. Even the moss-covered fences had potential. With repair and care, they could become strong again. Luke spent the rest of the morning mapping out his plans. He decided that he would restore the barn fully, repair the fences, and begin planting the rare seeds he had found. The orchard would need pruning and attention, but he was determined to bring it back to life. Every part of the ranch, he realized, had value if he treated it with care. By midday, Luke took a break under the shade of a large oak tree near the creek. He ate a simple meal and thought about the people in town who had mocked him. Their laughter no longer bothered him. In fact, it motivated him further. They could not see what he saw. a ranch full of life, potential, and hidden treasures. While resting, Luke noticed movement near the creek. Curious, he walked closer and discovered a small natural spring hidden behind the waterfall. The water was clear and cool, perfect for irrigation and for the animals he planned to raise. Luke's heart leapt. This spring, hidden for years, could provide everything he needed for the ranch to thrive. Excited by his discoveries, Luke spent the afternoon working tirelessly. He repaired parts of the barn roof, cleared fallen branches from the pasture, and even started planting some of the seeds he had found in the cellar. The work was hard, but he felt alive and satisfied. Each small step brought the ranch closer to life, and he knew that his great-uncle's faith in him was not misplaced. As the sun began to set, Luke stood on a hill overlooking the property. The creek sparkled in the fading light. The barn cast long shadows across the fields, and the orchard glowed with golden hues. Luke felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The ranch, once mocked and abandoned, was beginning to show signs of transformation. That evening, Luke returned to the house and prepared a modest dinner. He sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky. The ranch was quiet except for the gentle sounds of nature, the creek, the wind through the trees, and the occasional hoot of an owl. Luke felt a profound sense of peace. He knew that the work ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready. Before going to bed, he wrote in his journal, "Today I uncovered treasures that were hidden for decades. This land has more value than anyone in town could imagine. I feel proud to be its caretaker. I will work hard, and one day this ranch will shine." Luke's thoughts drifted to the future. He imagined the barn fully restored, cattle grazing in the lush pastures, and visitors coming to see the hidden beauty of the ranch. He pictured children playing in the orchard, families enjoying the creek, and the land thriving under his care. The moss-covered ranch was no longer a symbol of neglect. It was a canvas waiting for him to paint its future. Sleep came easily that night, filled with dreams of possibility. Luke knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities. The cellar, the orchard, the creek, and even the moss-covered fences were full of potential. With patience, care, and determination, he could turn this forgotten ranch into something extraordinary. As Luke drifted off to sleep, he felt a quiet excitement. The ranch had begun to reveal its secrets, and he knew that this was only the beginning. The townsfolk who had laughed at him could not see what he saw. They could not see the hidden treasures, the fertile soil, the natural spring, or the potential waiting to be realized. Luke smiled in the darkness, feeling a connection to his great-uncle and to the land itself. The moss-covered ranch, once forgotten, was alive with promise. And Luke, with his determination, patience, and vision, was ready to uncover every secret it held. Tomorrow, he thought, would be another day of discovery, another day of hard work, and another step toward transforming this ranch into a place of life, beauty, and value. The journey had only just begun, but Luke was ready for it. And somewhere deep in his heart he knew that the ranch was not just land. It was a gift, a challenge, and a legacy waiting to be fulfilled. Luke woke to the sound of birds singing and the soft gurgle of the creek near the house. Sunlight spilled through the gaps in the wooden walls, casting warm streaks across the floor. He stretched and rubbed the sleep from his eyes, excitement bubbling inside him. Today he would explore the ranch fully, learn the lay of the land, and begin the work that no one else thought possible. After a quick breakfast of bread and cheese he had packed from town, Luke stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, carrying the smell of damp moss and fresh earth. The ranch looked different in the morning light. The moss on the fences glistened, the creek sparkled, and the trees seemed taller and more alive. Luke's heart raced with anticipation. He started near the barn. The structure had been leaning for years, and some boards had rotted away. Luke inspected the doors and windows carefully. He wanted to make sure it was safe before he worked inside. Using his tools, he began repairing the broken wood. Hammer by hammer, board by board, he worked until his arms ached. The sun climbed higher and sweat poured down his face, but Luke did not complain. Every small repair made the barn feel more like a home. Next, he walked to the fenced pasture where he imagined cattle grazing. The fences were overgrown with vines, and in some places moss had eaten through the wood. Luke knelt down and examined the soil. Surprisingly, it was rich and dark, perfect for growing grass or crops. That thought lifted his spirits. The land might have looked abandoned, but it had potential. As Luke worked, he discovered other small wonders. A patch of wildflowers had grown near the edge of the creek, their bright colors standing out against the green moss. A family of rabbits darted through the grass, unafraid of his presence. Luke smiled, realizing that this ranch, though neglected, was alive in its own way. By late morning, Luke had cleared a small section of the pasture. He removed fallen branches, untangled vines, and began patching up the fence. While working, he noticed something unusual, a small moss-covered stone with strange markings. Curious, he brushed away the moss and realized it was part of a larger structure hidden beneath the overgrowth. It looked like the corner of an old well or a small storage cellar. Excited, Luke decided he would investigate it later. For now, he had plenty of work ahead. He walked back toward the house for water and noticed that the roof of the main house had a few holes. Rain had likely leaked in during storms, causing damage to the floor and walls. Luke made a mental note to repair the roof next. After a short break, he returned to the barn and continued working. As he hammered and sawed, he thought about the townsfolk who had laughed at him. Their words echoed in his mind. "That place is worthless. You'll never make it work. Why waste your time?" At first, those words had stung, but now they fueled him. Luke realized that their laughter did not define the ranch's value. Only his hard work, patience, and determination could reveal its true worth. Around midday, Luke paused to eat his simple lunch. Sitting under a tree, he watched the creek flow, imagining the ranch as it could be. Lush pastures, strong fences, healthy animals, and a cozy, repaired house. He knew it would take months, maybe years, but the vision filled him with hope. After lunch, he explored more of the property. Behind the barn, he found an overgrown orchard. Trees once planted with care were now tangled with wild vines. Some were barren, but others still bore small, sour fruits. Luke smiled. With pruning and care, these trees could thrive again. He decided that restoring the orchard would be one of his first projects. While walking through the orchard, he stumbled upon another surprise. Near a cluster of tall oaks, he saw the outline of a small building hidden beneath ivy and moss. The door was partially open, and inside he glimpsed old tools, barrels, and dusty crates. Luke's curiosity piqued. He pulled the door fully open and stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled of earth and old wood. Luke carefully examined the contents. Most of the tools were rusty, but he could clean and repair them. In one corner, he discovered a wooden box, locked but not securely. Using a small hammer, he gently pried it open. Inside were papers, maps, and notes that seemed very old. Luke's eyes widened as he read the first few lines. The papers detailed the history of the ranch, explaining how his great-uncle had carefully maintained it and why it had become overgrown in later years. Some maps showed hidden sections of the property and areas rich with fertile soil. One note even mentioned mineral deposits beneath the ground. Luke's heart raced. The ranch was far more valuable than anyone had imagined. For a moment, he thought of the townsfolk and their laughter. They had mocked him without knowing the ranch's secrets. Luke smiled quietly to himself. He would prove them wrong, not with words, but with results. The rest of the afternoon was spent clearing smaller areas and repairing what he could. Luke's hands were sore and his clothes were covered in dirt, but he felt alive. Each stroke of the hammer, each pull of a vine, each patch on the fence felt like progress. The ranch was slowly responding to his care, almost as if it knew it had been waiting for someone like him. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Luke paused to rest. He looked over the fields he had cleared and the barn that was slowly taking shape again. The creek shimmered in the fading light, and the trees swayed gently in the evening breeze. Despite the exhaustion, Luke felt a deep satisfaction. He had faced the first day with determination and curiosity, and the ranch had rewarded him in small but meaningful ways. Before heading inside, Luke walked back to the moss-covered stone he had found earlier. He dug around it carefully, uncovering what seemed like the edge of a hidden cellar. Luke's mind raced with possibilities. What could be inside? Was it more tools, supplies, or something even more valuable? He decided to wait until the next day to investigate further. That night, Luke prepared a simple meal by the fire and sat on the porch, watching the stars appear in the clear sky. The ranch was quiet, alive with the sounds of nature. Crickets chirped, the wind whispered through the trees, and the creek bubbled softly in the distance. Luke felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. He thought about the days to come, the hard work, the challenges, the discoveries, and the possibilities. The moss-covered ranch, once laughed at by the townsfolk, was slowly revealing its potential. Luke understood that it would not be easy, but he was ready. This was his land, his challenge, and his opportunity. Before going to bed, Luke wrote a few notes in his own journal, inspired by his great-uncle's words. He wanted to record everything, the progress, the discoveries, and his plans. He knew that one day, these notes would tell the story of how a young cowboy had transformed a forgotten ranch into something extraordinary. As he lay down to sleep, Luke felt a quiet excitement. He was not just restoring a ranch. He was beginning an adventure that would shape the rest of his life. The moss-covered land, once mocked and forgotten, was now alive with promise. Luke knew that he had taken the first step toward something greater than he had ever imagined. And deep inside, he smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new work, new discoveries, and another day to prove the value of the land he had inherited. Luke was a young cowboy who had grown up on the outskirts of a small town. His life had always been simple, filled with the rhythm of horses' hooves, the smell of hay in the mornings, and the quiet beauty of wide-open fields. Luke liked it that way. He had never been one for excitement or fancy things. Most days he woke with the sun, tended to his small herd, fixed broken fences, and worked the land as best as he could. Life was steady, predictable, and, for Luke, enough. But everything changed on a windy afternoon in early spring. The mail arrived, just like it always did, and Luke sat on the porch brushing the dust off a letter that looked different from the usual bills and advertisements. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and stamped with a seal he had never seen. His name, Luke Marshall, was written in bold, neat letters. He frowned. Who would send him something like this? He tore the envelope carefully, and inside was a letter from a law office in a city far away. The letter explained that his great-uncle, a man Luke had never met, had passed away. Luke read slowly, the words blurring together at first, but then one line made him sit up straighter. He had inherited his great-uncle's ranch. Luke blinked. A ranch, that was unexpected. He had never imagined owning a property beyond the little homestead his parents had left him. He ran his fingers over the paper, reading again the part that described the ranch. It was an old moss-covered property, lost to time and untouched for years. The lawyer assured him that the paperwork was complete, and that the ranch was now his. Excitement and doubt fought inside him. He could hear the voices of the townsfolk even before they said a word. He could already imagine their laughter. He rode into town the next day, letter in hand, and told a few of the neighbors what had happened. "Luke," said Tom, a rancher who owned one of the largest herds in the county. "You're joking, right? That place is just a ruin. Moss everywhere, broken fences, and no one even lives there." Luke nodded, smiling faintly. "I know it's old, but it's mine now." Tom laughed so hard that he nearly fell off his chair. "Yours? You're telling me you're going to live in a moss-covered shack and fix what's probably falling apart?" Luke shrugged. "I'll see it first. Maybe it's not as bad as you think." But the townsfolk's laughter didn't stop there. Many came to Luke, teasing him, telling him that he had inherited nothing but trouble. Some said he would never be able to sell it. Some said it was worthless, and others joked that the moss might have swallowed the house entirely. Even his closest friends, people who had worked beside him in fields and helped with the animals, shook their heads. "Luke, don't get your hopes up," they said. "I wouldn't waste my time on that place." Despite all this, Luke felt a strange thrill. The idea of a new place, hidden away from the eyes of the town, filled him with curiosity. Something about the ranch called to him. Maybe it was the challenge, maybe it was the promise of quiet life, or maybe it was the thought of proving himself. Early the next morning, Luke packed his bags, loaded supplies onto his horse, and prepared to leave. He had no idea what he would find at the ranch, but he knew he had to see it for himself. He said goodbye to his parents, who were supportive but worried, and set off down the dusty trail that would lead him to his inheritance. The journey was long. Luke rode for hours over hills and through forests, following the directions from the lawyer's map. The further he went, the quieter the world became. Birds sang softly in the trees, and the wind rustled through the grass in a calming rhythm. Luke felt more alive with every mile. Finally, as the sun began to dip behind the hills, he arrived. And there it was. The ranch lay in a small valley surrounded by towering oak trees. Moss covered nearly every surface, giving the place a soft green glow. The wooden fences sagged under years of neglect, and the barn leaned slightly to one side. A thin wisp of smoke rose from a chimney, though it seemed unlikely that anyone had lived here recently. The creek that ran along the edge of the property glittered in the sunlight, almost as if it were welcoming him. Luke dismounted and walked slowly toward the house. He ran his hand over the moss-covered walls, feeling the rough texture beneath his fingers. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a dusty interior filled with old furniture and the smell of wood that had not been polished in years. He could see cobwebs in the corners and faded letters stacked on a small table. Despite the neglect, Luke felt a strange warmth in the place. The house was quiet, but it had character. It had history, and for some reason it felt like it had been waiting for him. He began exploring, moving from room to room. In one corner he found a rocking chair, worn but sturdy. On a shelf, old books were lined neatly, their spines faded with age. One book in particular caught his eye. It was a journal, with yellowed pages and his great-uncle's handwriting. Luke sat down and began reading. The first few pages were simple notes about farm work and weather, but then he came across a passage that made him pause. This land may seem forgotten by the world, but it has value in ways most cannot see. Treat it with care, and it will reward you in ways beyond your imagination. Luke smiled. There was wisdom in the words, a quiet confidence that his great-uncle had left for him. Maybe this ranch was more than moss and broken fences. Maybe it had secrets, treasures of its own. The sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the valley. Luke stood outside, looking at the fields that stretched beyond the house. Wildflowers grew in patches. The creek reflected the colors of the sky, and the trees swayed gently in the breeze. For the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, this place could become something extraordinary. That night, Luke slept in one of the rooms upstairs. He could hear the soft chirping of crickets and the distant call of an owl. The house creaked occasionally, and the wind whispered through the cracks in the walls. But instead of fear, Luke felt peace. He had inherited not just a ranch, but a chance to create his own story. The next morning, he awoke early, energized. He planned to start exploring the land fully, to understand what he had really inherited. He didn't know yet what challenges awaited him, but Luke felt ready. He was determined to turn the moss-covered ranch into something alive again, and somewhere deep inside he knew that this was only the beginning of an adventure that would change his life forever.